This is Joe Carpenter. Today is June 21st, 2022, and I am interviewing Colonel Kelley Keating for the first time. This interview is taking place at University Hall at the University of Texas in Arlington. It is sponsored by the College of Liberal Arts and is part of the Maverick Veterans Voices Project. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Where are you from originally, and what can you tell me about your growing up?
I'm originally from Victorville, California, which is in the Mojave Desert of Southern California. So those that have been to what we call NTC, National Training Center, Fort Irwin. So that's where I am. That's where I come from. Growing up, it was a small town. It's still a small town in most regards. But I had the privilege of growing up in the 80s. So a lot of freedom, a lot of bike rides, that kind of thing. A very kind of simple place, simple life, simple people. Not offensively, but just a simple time.
I understand.
Yeah.
Very good. So what high school did you attend?
Victor Valley Union High School is the only high school in the area because,
Right.
again, not a big place. And I was graduating class in 1998.
Tell me a little bit about the environment where you were growing up. And I mean, you said the desert.
Yes, which explains why I'm so tan. The desert loves me.
Right.
And so much, I guess depending on where you're from, you'll appreciate that, it's a lot of hunting for a tree in a parking lot. It's really amazing. So I go back now, and I don't know how I survived because it is so hot. People say, don't worry about it, it's a dry heat.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is hot, very hot. So now I avoid going back in the summer. I
Oh,
find
do
it
you?
just to be difficult, and my parents still have the same home. So we have swamp coolers, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
different than central air. So I have a habit of saying, is the cooler on? And people don't, like, what are you talking about? So growing up to create the breeze of the
Yes,
home,
yes.
and I appreciate AC, certainly, but yeah, definitely hot, and it's in the valley, so lots of wind. But just anywhere in California, you can drive there, and if you want to go, Disney's not too far, mountains aren't too far, beach is not too far. So as long as you have a car and can drive, you can really, California's a beautiful state.
Did you, were you in ROTC in high school?
I was not. I had some acquaintances. I knew some people that were in ROTC, but I didn't know what they were doing or why they were doing it. I had no baseline. And I guess at the time, I also didn't know to ask, what does that mean? Like, why are you standing out there in the sun? I was in the shade.
Yes, yes.
Why are you doing
I
that?
understand. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Did you have any family members who were in the military?
I did. I had, I didn't know it at the time though. So my grandfather was in World War II. He was a prisoner of war. He was a lot of things that I didn't even know what it meant at the time. But true kind of silent generation is that you didn't ask those questions. So although I knew that he served, I knew that it was also something that we weren't allowed to talk about.
Were you ever able to talk about it?
After high school in 1998, so we'll back it up. In 1997, I joined the military. Okay. So I went on a delayed entry program. I wanted to be a soldier, and I took my contract to my grandfather because he was the only person that I knew that served, and I asked him to look at it. I didn't know if he even knew what he was looking at, but it seemed like that was the thing to do. He said good job or okay or something to that effect, but he never talked about his experience. But at the same time, maybe he did, and I didn't know what those words meant. So I know later that he was an armor officer, but if you said armor to an 18-year-old, I don't know what that means. I also knew my father was drafted for Vietnam, that he was airborne, but then during the time the conflict was over, and he never went overseas. But that's all I really know.
So how did you become interested in joining the military?
I saw a movie. It was, I think it must have been 1996. And there was this movie called The Rock. Do you know this movie? So it has Sean Connery. I can't think of his name. Nicolas Cage. Thank you very much. Yeah, Sean Connery, Nicolas Cage.
A disembodied voice from off the camera.
I mean, beautiful voice. His voice is beautiful. It really just draws your attention. So the movie is that there's something has happened, and the the American patriots did not get what they deserved, and so this general goes and he just goes rogue, right? He wants the government to do the right thing, and so he takes over Alcatraz, which is just an island off of San Francisco. So he does that with his little rogue army, and in true form, they go and they send in the Marines to infiltrate and to get into Alcatraz and establish, because this rogue general was going to send chemicals into San Francisco and kill millions of people. And that was a threat. So they sent in these Marines. The Marines infiltrate, and they come in through the shower kind of systems. They come in through the bottom. And they were tipped off by some radars or something. And so the rogue army they had them surrounded. They were on the perimeter. They were up top. And the Marines come in, and they know they're caught. They're completely surrounded. Weapons are facing them. They're, in a ditch, essentially. And they know they're going to die. And the Marine in that scene says, "Hey, sir, the general saying, put down your weapons, please, no one has to die here." And the Marine is looking up at him and saying, "General, God knows that I agree with you. I agree with why you're here, but I swore an oath to defend against all enemies, foreign, sir, and domestic." And it was in that moment, I was this completely fictitious character that I was like, I like that. And so I went to the Marine Corps the next day. Next day, I was like, this is what this is. This is what I want to do. But I was 16, and they said, "Well, hey, just come back when you're serious," or something to that effect. And I was like, okay, well, I guess.
Yeah.
So I left, and not long later, the Army called and said, "What are you doing?" I wasn't doing anything. They said, "Hey, come take this little test. We call it the ASVAB." I was like, okay.
And you're still just out of high school?
And I was still in high school.
Oh, still in high school at this point?
I was still in high school.
Okay.
So I took the ASVAB, which is the what allows you to enter service.
Sure.
And at the time, I also wanted to be a dentist. So I didn't know how to be a dentist. I didn't know any dentist. The internet wasn't a thing that was in the homes yet. So I went and took the ASVAB. I scored very high. I said, "Well, can I go into dentistry?" And they were just like, sure you can. So I signed then. My parents came. They signed because at that time, then I was 17. And then it was for a year later. So I would leave just a few weeks after I graduated high school.
And so you were enlisted for what period of time?
Almost 6 years.
Wow.
Yep.
And as a dental technician?
Dental specialist. And then I got to go to dental hygiene school, which is different than regular hygiene school. So I was doing that for a number of years, and then 9/11 happened, and I came, and I was at Fort Bliss, Texas, and this is now 2002, and the surge was getting ready, right, for 2003,
Yes.
and we were pumping through the CIA, NSA, anybody that was going, all the contractors were coming through my dental clinic to get ready to go, and they were lined up in the hallway. It was every Wednesday, there would just be 50 people that were lined up just to get checked to like, hey, I'm ready to go. And I couldn't believe that all these civilians were going somewhere and that they were doing something. And I just knew I had to do something else. So then I said, well, let me see what else I can do. How can I get into this conflict? How can I do my part? And then I did this little thing called Green to Gold, which is an enlisted officer program. Which put me on administrative discharge, even though I had 5.5 years at that time. I was close to the end of my enlistment anyway, which was initially 6 years. So I dropped my packet, and I went green to gold for 2 years, and then commissioned in the service 2 years later. That was 2006.
And what is your branch and specialty?
So I'm now an AG officer. It's Adjutant General Corps. And it is the closest thing you could say is that it's HR. So we're human resource professionals in the Army.
Where did you go to college?
UT El Paso.
Okay.
So I was at Fort Bliss, which is right outside El
Yes.
Paso. So it was just kind of one of those easy buttons of, and again, it's just kind of looking for information when you don't know people that have done it. So I knew Green to Gold a little bit, but then I didn't know how to do it necessarily, and so I just walked over to the ROTC program at El Paso, and I was like, how do I do this? And they helped me through the process.
Just like that?
Just like that.
So what was your major in college, and why did you choose that major?
Well, I picked human resources, ironically, because it was what I could do in 2 years. And at the time, it was not, we have active duty green and gold options now, but that was not the case at the time. So at the time that I was separating, I went into the reserve component. The reserves helped pay for my school. but I wasn't getting paid otherwise. So we got the Army stipend, but that's not enough to live on. So I picked, what can I do with the credits I had to transfer, right? So to get accepted as an academic junior, what can I finish in 2 years flat, because I need to get back into the force and work. So I picked human resources, and it worked out for me because when I commissioned, I was a transportation corps officer. And because I thought at the time, well, convoys are the only way for me to get into Iraq and do my part. So, you know, women weren't in the infantry at that time. So I went, and then my first duty assignment was in Korea, and you're just spending, you know, the monsoon season in the motor pool digging out the same generators that they've done for decades before. And I was like, I don't know if this is for me.
Right.
So I was able to transfer into AG because I have a human resources degree, was part of my, you know, kind of claim as to why I need to. And so, I mean, I guess all things happen for a reason. And so I've been AG since. That was 2007 or 8. So now here we are, over a decade plus later. It's worked out just fine.
So do the math for me. I'm a history major. How long have you been in?
So I came in 1998, but because I got out for ROTC for those 2 years, that changes my active duty time. So
does it?
It does not count for retirement, but it counts for your time in service.
Okay.
So at this time, I have 24 years of service and 22 towards retirement.
And was there anyone on the faculty at UTEP that influenced you in any way?
All of them, truly. And there's something of a little bit of wanting them to be proud of you. So I had so many great people just talk about luck and timing. And so my PMS, Colonel Johnny Carr, is actually in my brigade now. He's retired. And he's working as a civilian in my brigade, so I was able to get back in touch with him. So I think about him and how he was as a PMS, and just kind of always being there, right? He's always there, not always the one that was talking, not always the one that was necessarily, you know, saying something that I put into my kit bag. He was always there. So I remember that, and that's what I try to emulate here too. Is just always being present. That you know, I'm looking. But I had a Sergeant Major, Rod Beach, and he was just discipline, standards, discipline, do the right thing all the time. And then Sergeant Major, he was at E7 at the time, Will Ryan, and I bumped into him, must have been 7 years ago. He was CSM now, Command Sergeant Major, and he was doing a pre-command course when I was in ARC intermediate level, like literally bumped into him. So it's pretty amazing that these people kind of circle back into your life. But really,
because it's a very small world.
It is. It absolutely is. And then our MS 1 and 2 is a contractor. I wanted to be just like him. Oh my gosh, like I wanted to be just like him so bad I picked Transportation Corps, because I just thought, wow, like this guy really, he has it. Whatever that it is that I'm chasing, like that's him. So they definitely all had an impact on me. And it was a really awesome experience.
And he's responsible for you ending up in Korea?
He is.
So much for Iraq. You
And
end up
so,
in Korea.
I tell you.
Oh, yeah, that's the way the Army works. And what year did you graduate? You may have mentioned this already, but what year did you graduate from college?
So I graduated in college in 2006.
And you're commissioned upon graduation?
Correct. That was December of 2006.
After that period of time, where did you go for training after college?
I went to Fort Eustis, Virginia, for the transportation school, OBC, and then I went to Korea after that. So I was trying to get to Iraq. I went to Korea, which that makes sense, and then I went to Fort Hood. So when you go to Fort Hood, you were bound to get on deployment. So I just had to wait for my time. But at that time, I had transferred into the AG Corps as well, so a little bit different. So I did get my tour to Iraq when I was at Fort Hood, and then time just goes pretty quickly. And then you go to Captain Screw course, which for in AG Corps is in Columbia, South Carolina, at Fort Jackson. Went back to Fort Hood for a stint, and then I went to Arlington, Virginia, for the 2012 inauguration to work protocol. So I did that for 1 year, which was amazing. And luck and timing again is I was there when, in the old guard, which is right there at Fort Myer, they needed an adjutant pretty quickly.
Really?
So I got lucky, and and somebody else got unlucky. They got fired.
Oh, no.
And so their loss was my gain. They needed
Right.
someone quickly, and they brought me over, and that was one of the most rewarding experiences that I've
Sure.
ever had.
I'm sure.
Absolutely phenomenal leaders again, people that you just really just want to be like. So really that kind of put me on trajectory. But then I went to ILE, which is our intermediate level education, which is at Fort Leavenworth, and it's a year for everybody. So that was kind of interesting. You meet new people. That was. And you're like, what do I do next? And I got selected to go to 3rd Special Forces Group, which is at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Another phenomenal experience, phenomenal leaders, people that you just really grab you, and you're like, I'm rowing on this boat. I want to be on this team. And then I was selected to go to another special unit. So I went up to Virginia for a couple of years, and I was a little bit getting tired, to be honest. I had been doing the same job for over 5 years at that point, and just kind of, well, I need to do something else. I'm getting a little, was getting a little redundant. And
So let me understand then. So you were an adjutant in each one of these positions. Is that correct?
Correct.
So for 5 years, from Fort Myer to Fort Bragg, you're
The same job.
The same job.
It's different echelons, but really kind of the same job. And I was on the track, we call it the G1 track for command. So in my field, you can be a battalion commander, or you can go, and it's the same command select credit to go be a G1. But I kind of felt that I needed just something different before I did that job. And so I thought, well, let me see if I'm competitive for this PMS, because that would be a rewarding experience. And then I could do something different and decide if I'm going to continue on this command track. And I came out on the list, and here I am.
Well, it sounds like you had a really good background to prepare you for a position like this. Certainly prepare you for selection, because you served in these elite units, and I would think that would put you on top of the list.
Well, there's a lot of, so PMS is different than Command Select List in that it's a broad gamut of people they look at. So they'll look at people that are former battalion commanders, and they'll look at folks that are 04 promotables or in their zone. So it's a pretty lot of breadth there and depth when you're talking with people that have been former battalion commanders. So to compete with them is, difficult. And the thing that you don't know is what's happening with people. So my generation has been in a time of war for 20 years. We've been in 20-year conflict, and so as you look at the things that you can do, not everybody's going to pick to be a battalion commander, because sometimes their values are somewhere else, and so you just don't know what it's going to look like when you put in for anything. But what I always tell people is no's are free. So if you want it, just give it a shot.
So through your training, did you feel adequately prepared for what was to come next in your career? So as you progress.
I felt prepared for the job I just left, is what I felt prepared for.
That's an interesting way to put it.
So going in, it's just the benefit, one of the benefits of the Army is that it challenges you. It also, sometimes you're a little too young and immature. And to see and it's certainly, you're just not at the perspective to see the big picture, so you don't understand. So, if I had it all to do it again, would I do it differently? I wouldn't do my path differently, but I would have done the job better. But I can say that the time I was there, I gave it what I had, and only with time and perspective and learning and growth can you kind of look back and say, oh man, I jacked that one up a little bit.
I think we all jacked a few things up every now and then.
But it's not malicious.
Right, and it's not the end of the world either.
Right.
Feels like it at the time.
Absolutely.
And where all did you serve overseas? You said Korea, you said Iraq. Where else did you serve overseas?
I was in Germany when I was enlisted, so that was many moons ago at this point. And that's it for my overseas tours. Yeah, so you think, oh, I'll get back there, but again, it comes down to, well, that wasn't in my movement cycle, the job wasn't available, and you kind of have to pick what you want to do. Do you want the location over the job? Well, that has impacts to your career. Or do you want to take the job and set yourself up? So I always selected the job, and I'm glad I did. That worked out for me.
Did you receive any particular cultural or language training, particularly when you're going to Iraq? Was there any cultural or language training that you had to go through to prepare you for that deployment?
At the time, we had, starting in my OBC at that time, we had a weekly cultural awareness training, and I don't recall language training. It certainly wasn't to the extent where you would be able to really converse.
Right.
But we also, within our schools, our PME, Professional Military Education structure, is that we will have officers from other nations that come. And then they have their perspective that they bring to the piece, and there's also, worlds to gain from those experiences as well. But I think they do a good job of giving you just like a baseline understanding, and then when you need some breadth and depth to something, then you're in that position, that job that would give it to you. But for the average person, they just give you kind of what you need.
Did you serve in any combat role?
No, I did not. Service support.
And during your time in service, have you lost anyone that's close to you?
Personally, no. I would say at the time, our mutual friend, I actually use his story quite often. So he was my husband's friend, and his name was Wally. And Wally, it was a surge, it was 2003, and Wally was getting ready to retire, and he was a medic. And he said, well, let me just go out and get this tax-free money, because when you're deployed, there's a tax benefit, and you get extra money for combat pay and things like that. And then that would take some pressure off of him getting a job right away when he departed service. And so he goes out, and he's on, and he gets blown up by an IED, and he comes back, and he left his wife and kids. And I did know him, but it really was my husband's friend. And I share his story when people say things like, oh, I'm just gonna do this, I'm just gonna do this. Because life has a way of happening, and you need to be prepared. And it's this idea that nothing's gonna happen to me is just absolutely, maybe statistically the math works out and you're right, except when you're wrong. So, and
right, that's true.
When I was in Baghdad, I was the Casualty Operations OIC. So we had the geographic region, and so I processed all the paperwork. They were not my friends necessarily, but you see what happened, and you're aware.
Still your people.
And right, and just I'm grateful for that experience, because I got to see how much the Army really tries to take care of these families and give them the respects. And then I got to see the other side of it. So casualty reporting when I was in Baghdad, and then all the way down to presenting, colors in Arlington Cemetery when I was in the Old Guard. So I really have seen the whole gamut of what the Army does, and then behind the scenes what they do. And I know there's reports of things. Sometimes things go wrong, but I have to say that they really try to do the best they can for the families that have lost loved ones.
And how long were you in Iraq?
1 year.
That's just pretty much the typical deployment, isn't it?
It was at the time. That's right.
And were you married or in a relationship at that time?
I was. Yep, I was married. I was married when I was enlisted.
Oh, okay.
And so and I went green to gold. We ended up getting divorced in 2011. We were in back-to-back deployments. So he went with one division, I went with another.
So he was in the service as well.
He was in service as well.
I see.
So it was over 2 years of separation. And, again, naive. It'll be fine. It'll be okay. But, if I was maybe older, maybe it would have been okay. But at the time that you're that young and immature, we found it didn't work for us, so we were divorced.
And how did you communicate with your loved ones when you were overseas?
Oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed to say, but MySpace was a thing at that time. And I think Facebook had come out, but I wasn't on Facebook yet, just because I'm not tech savvy.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, so we did MySpace, and because I worked in an office, though, I did have the benefit of having a phone. So because I wasn't out, I wasn't out in convoys every day. So I was able to call home probably almost daily, unless we were in a blackout.
And you stayed in contact with your parents, and did you have brothers and sisters?
I do, but I sent my mom. My mom was really awesome, actually. So I sent my mom just emails of, hey, this is what's going on. But then because I had soldiers that didn't necessarily have a good relationship with their families, I would also send my mom wish list. So if the kids didn't have, it was things like, oh, I miss my Lucky Charms, or I miss my, whatever, my Oreos. So I would just kind of overhear them talking, and then my mom would send gift boxes to them.
Wow.
And so she was, and I think she really enjoyed it. She would make brownies.
That's
She
great.
she was keeping the Postal Service alive. I'll tell you that. Like, she was just pumping them out, and I was able to spread a little bit of cheer through her generosity.
That's leadership, though, isn't it? Is being aware of what your soldiers need and providing those little things
When
for
you
them.
can, yeah, certainly.
So how did you deal with stress during that period of time?
Sometimes not well. Sometimes I found the emotion of losing so many people really hard.
And did you just go off by yourself? Did you?
Oh, well, that's one of the things that I did find hard, is that there's always people around.
Right.
And so sometimes to find some space by yourself is, my goodness, you just like, and it's not necessarily what the rules are. So the rules might say have a battle buddy everywhere you go, for because you're it's not your nation, you're
Right.
somewhere. So that certainly was an issue there. Just trying to find a place to just breathe. You're brushing teeth with dozens of people at a time. Everywhere you go, there's people. You're eating at the same place. So sometimes just finding a little bit of quiet space for yourself can only be achieved a little bit at a time.
What kind of challenges did being away from home create? You mentioned, for instance, in your enlistment, there was the divorce, and obviously that's a huge challenge. What other challenges were created by your being far away from home like that?
I guess I've been away from home before, but being in a combat role, which is really all I wanted to do. So since my whole desire to be an officer was based off of my ability to do something big and help in my own way for the conflict, and everybody after 9/11 was joining the service, and everybody was a patriot, and we really saw this influx of different people. My challenges of being away were kind of, I guess now that I think about it, something I failed at, and that I let the job be more important than my relationships, and that I let the job be who I am and define me as a person. So if I'm not a good officer, then what am I? If I'm not great at this job, then I don't deserve to be here. If all these what ifs that no one imparted on me, but I didn't do a good job at keeping in touch really with anybody.
You mentioned earlier what the things that come with maturity. Is that not one of those things that comes with maturity?
Oh.
Is the recognition that, hey, these things are more important.
They are.
Yeah.
And I think, it's also necessary, and I'm glad that I had that experience. So in the future, when I meet people that are worth my time, I'll hold on to them, and I'll treat them very well. But the reality is that I held on to bad relationships because I moved every 2 years. I held on to high school relationships because they felt like home, or they felt like people that knew me before I was this person in uniform, right? They knew my first name. Therefore, they must know me. So I stayed in relationships that were comfortable instead of challenging myself and meeting other people that, because maybe I felt insecure, or maybe I thought they were too smart or too something, again, self-imposed kind of thoughts. So I'm glad to have learned the lessons that I've learned, helped me grow as a person.
How does someone, especially an officer, a female officer, is it more challenging for you to develop relationships in the service than men or enlisted men and women? is it more challenging for you to develop those kind of relationships that are more?
I think it is. Of course, I don't have the perspective, but every female officer I've ever met, we all kind of have the same thought about it, right? So you're often, by yourself, that you're the single. So for my case, maybe I was a single staff officer that was a female. So you can't fraternize. So that takes away the listed population. So now you're down to, 10% of your unit, let's say. And then you don't want to be, there's only so much you can do in a friendship, So probably you and I, if I invite you to go get a pedicure on the weekend, well, your wife might not like that, right? So we're probably not going to be after work friends. We're going to be great, partners at work. So I would say it's been difficult for me, and I think that's one of the things that kind of forces you to turn into the job more. So the job is kind of where I have gotten my self-validation over the years, and then just, supporting my commander is what made me happy. So I think it's not until much later when you look around in life and you're like, oh man, I probably could have made more friends if I wasn't just so into that role that I was playing. But I do think it's difficult, and I think it's always going to be difficult.
Do you think that, so that need for self-validation, that has been a driver for you? Is that fair to say?
I say so. Yep.
And have you come to the place where you feel validated? Or are you still working towards that?
Well, I tell you, I took this job because I wanted that intrinsically rewarding experience. I wanted something that was my give back tour, or I'm going to give everything that I can back to whoever wants to listen, whoever wants to do it. And I feel that I'm really kind of understanding just that if we all just do our part, that is your role. Just do your part. Be a good citizen, and but foremost, I want people to be a good person, and be good within their own heart space of who they are and what they're doing, and then after that, then be a good, competent, Army officer. But if I could focus on one thing, if we just had good people, then we, filling the uniform, competence is, we can teach that. We can teach you the other things.
So are there eagles on the horizon for you?
There's not. I've decided to retire.
You have?
I have.
Okay. Is this breaking news?
It is relatively new.
Okay.
So I came here, and I have a 4-year-old son. So I waited a long time because I was very busy.
Yes.
So I waited a long time. So just kind of just seeing him and the life that I want for him. I don't see that life, moving from place to place and me working the hours that are required. And people do it all the time, and people balance it. And there's plenty of women that do this masterfully well. I have learned that I'm just not going to be one of those women. So I've decided to retire and give my son the life that I envisioned for him.
Now your husband presently is?
Retired Navy.
Not retired Navy, okay.
Yeah, so he's retired Navy. I met him from high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How interesting.
I tell you. So he went into the Navy. So he retired, and he's employed and doing, it's great.
So
life goes on.
How does your house look on Army Navy Day game day? That's what I'm trying to get out.
It's, we joke about it. Neither one of us really cares.
It's not that big
but we certainly, it's just kind of like just
ribbing
the rub
each
of it
other.
all. Yeah. That part's fun.
So, what medals and citations have you been awarded that you are particularly proud of?
I don't know if I would say I feel particularly proud of them. I don't view them that way. So I view our evaluation, and like your demonstrated potential for performance. And I view what my commander says for my potential in the service. I think that the medals and awards they're not really written for you, if that makes any sense.
Expound on that a little bit.
I see that as something that I will give to, my son if he's interested, for the things that I did, these achievements that were rendered. But I don't necessarily take that as being as valuable as my commander sitting with me and telling me that I helped and that I did my part within, the skill set that I was operating under.
That might be an unusual perspective.
I don't know. No one's ever asked me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Is there a medal or a badge or something that is more meaningful to you than another one, represents something?
I guess I'm being airborne and air assault qualified. I like those because those are not, it's not my favorite to go up in a plane or a helicopter, and it's just not something that I think is, it's not safe. It's just
coming from an Army officer, it's just not safe.
It's not super safe. No one's ever asked me, as an AG officer to jump in and, jump into combat and go set up shop so I can process an evaluation or, so it's just one of those things you're like, is this really necessary? But what a way to challenge yourself.
Sure.
And to do something that not everybody wants to do or gets to do.
Or can do.
Or can do, absolutely. And so you see folks that are paralyzed by fear when they have heights or paralyzed by something. So it is kind of nice to know that when you have to do something that your body's just gonna, because your body doing what your mind wants is not always there. So just being fortunate enough to have your body do what your mind says, I don't want it, but we're gonna do it anyway. So pretty, I guess.
But that's really the test of courage, is it not? Being able to force your body to do something that it doesn't want to do.
I think about this quite often of what would I be? Would I be fight or flight? Like what, because really you're not tested very often.
Right.
Of what you're really going to be. And recently my son fell into the swimming pool. And I was there, but I wasn't right there. I was, a couple feet away. And your body just, or my body at least, my body just reacted. Just went in, got him out, and it was okay. And I feel just grateful. And it's but you just don't know.
Yes.
Until you're challenged with it, you really don't know.
Right.
But I guess you're training through the years. This is why we do this rope memorization of, like we're gonna do this battle drill again, we're gonna do this again, we're gonna do it again, we're gonna do it again.
Right.
And we do the crawl, walk, run. We do it again and again and again. And everybody's like, this is so stupid. Why do we do this? Well, we do it because that way your body just reacts. That way your body just does it and you don't have to think about it. So I guess I'm proof it works.
Yeah. It's automatic.
It was automatic for me. Yeah.
So by the time you retire, you will have served how many years?
25 and a half.
25 and a half. And so how much longer are we looking at here?
I'll retire December 23.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are there any specific experiences or people that you remember, people who maybe were outside the norm, made you laugh?
All the time. Man, if we'd have to narrow that down. My last, I worked for Colonel Bradley Moses in 3rd Group, and he was just the best sense of humor. Just so, you'd probably say it was cutthroat, if you're just like on the outside looking in, but just had such a humor to him, and really made the job enjoyable. Like it was just an absolute pleasure to be on his staff, and that's the kind of person that when I'm a staff person primarily, and when you're on staff, is you're like, wow, I want to be a part of this team. Yeah, and then I had Colonel Kurt Brinker, so SF officer again, same as Colonel Moses, and he said one of the things that he really changed. So as I was coming to this position, and we were having my final counseling, is he told me, Kelley, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. And because he told me, he said, you're quite transactional. And I am, right? So you come to my office, you want something, I give you the thing you want. And then over the years, I really have become very business in the business that we're in.
Sure.
But he told me to, just take a little bit of time and don't be afraid to be vulnerable with people, especially the young people that you're going to lead in our ROTC environment. And because I appreciated him, just giving me that kind of on the spot, like, like I kind of felt like you must really care about me to make this kind of correction and to notice something that I'm doing, and that it changed how I came into this position. Overall, is to just be a little more just softer.
Do you think that as a female officer that there's something in the back of your mind that says that vulnerability is weakness?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that's part of it. And in my mind, I know how I feel about the value that I see that women bring, for example. So I think that we can operate in any environment, and we can definitely turn it on. And if you want to call it masculine or feminine, kind of tendencies, sure. So we can turn on those. I think that we are kind of granted the permission, though, to turn on the feminine features when needed. And by feminine features, I mean that I can let other people be vulnerable with me. And that when folks lose people and they're in bereavement or they're having a problem, is maybe they feel more comfortable coming to me than they would necessarily like a male team leader. Maybe. I don't know for sure, but I'm just going to kind of assume that that's true, and that maybe that's a value that I bring to an organization as well, is just letting people come to you and for them to be vulnerable, even though I, vice versa, maybe have not done that and been vulnerable with others.
Do you feel like the women officers before you have kind of cleared the way and made it possible for you to be you and at the same time be an Army officer? Does that make sense?
I think if everyone does their part, then they've paved the way. And you don't know, I think sometimes it's not about what you do, but it's about what you inspire in other people. So I would say by other people doing their part and for wanting to do something different, that they do pave a different path for everybody. But my leadership really, especially over the last 10 years, has all been combat armed males. And last time I worked for a female, it's been a long time. But I will say that I don't know that people give their combat armed males enough credit. So, and the people that I deal with are, they're colonels. They're not privates. They're not 18. They're professionals within this profession of arms, and they conduct themselves professionally. And I went to at the time, Colonel Moses, who was the SF group commander, when I decided that I wanted to get pregnant. And I was really nervous because I wanted his permission, to be honest, because I wouldn't be able to jump out of planes, right? And I was probably going to get a little bit fat. And, changing your body shape when you're on staff is, people notice, right? So I went to him and told him, and sweat just pouring down my back of, this is the thing that I want to do. Because at the time I was 38. And I was like, well, if I don't do something soon, then the option might not be there later. And he was just kind of like, what are you talking about? You don't need my permission to do these things. Just kind of like, what conversation are we having? And so I think about this quite often, in that, what did I really think he was going to say? No, don't what? But at the same time, I did feel a need for him to know what I was planning. I didn't want it to be a surprise. And I'm too old to have a surprise pregnancy. It was not going to be a oops, So I would just say that sometimes you have to give people the chance to rise to the occasion.
And if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is that it's been males and females who have helped clear your path. It's not a...
Absolutely. So Colonel Moses, when he selected me to be his SF Group S1, he said, hey, I want someone that's never been in special operations. And he got a stack of files, and he picked me blindly out of the stack of files. So it didn't matter to him that I was a female. He just wanted somebody that was going to be capable to handle the job, because commanders have a very important job. So 100% that it's been both. It's not about being male or female. It's about being in the position to make a chance, or to make a change rather, and to use that position for good.
Do you feel like you've been discriminated against in any way in your service?
I don't.
So no impact on your career whatsoever. Does that mean the Army has arrived?
I don't think that it's where people think that it should be, but I would also say that I think it's probably on par with society. So do I feel that I've been impacted by being a female? I don't feel that way. But I have to say that I also don't desire some of the things other females desire. So I don't desire to go to Ranger School. I don't desire to do these things to which other people might feel like that's been a closed door for them.
Right.
That's not part of my wish list to do some things. So everything that I've wanted to do, I've been able to do, but it's been based off of merit. It's been based off of performance, and it's for having a file that was strong enough to warrant the opportunity.
So is there anything that brings back memories of your time in Iraq, for instance? Is there music? Is there sound, smells, anything like that that brings that time back to you, or any other time in your service for that matter?
I don't know in particular, but being the casualty OIC, there are a couple people that I think about all the time. And there was a time when I remembered everybody's name, but I've now kind of forgotten. But there's a couple of the stories, just like any movie that you've seen or book that you've read that you reflect on. I still think of them in that way, and just how sad their death has been. And I just wonder, like, hey, how's their family? And I don't know them. I don't even know their names at this point. But
Right.
I just know having.
It's still a memory.
It's a memory, and there's just, it's tough. The military is anything is tough. Not all the deaths were combat related either. Some of them were non-battle deaths. Some of them were truly accidents. Some of them were, heart attacks, and some of them just, it's not always combat related, but to lose somebody so suddenly and to not have the chance to say goodbye and to be so far away, it's, sometimes I think about that and I think how sad it is.
So do you see yourself being involved in any veterans organizations, anything like that once you retire?
I don't. Yeah, so I think my next challenge is because I've been in the Army since I was 18. So I left home out of high school. I joined the Army, and my next challenge for myself is to see who I am without the uniform. Doesn't mean I won't contribute monetarily or that I won't, do something, but I don't want to be an active member with it. I want to speak a different language, and I want to know that I can operate in society and that I'm going to be okay. That I'm looking forward to diving into, what Kelley's going to do, and the reason I'm retiring is because of my family. So,
Right.
I'm who am I going to be in the PTA? Am I going to take it over? Am I going to occupy by force?
Right.
But really just I'm looking forward to meeting different people and people that aren't military affiliated, and what have they been doing with their lives? Because sometimes, you see people having coffee at like 10 a.m. when you're driving from an appointment. You're like, what are you doing? How are you here? Where do you work?
Right.
How is this work? Like, I'm so curious of what is the rest of the world doing? Are they... Not everybody else is just praying that they make it till Friday. Are you?
Right.
Actually.
But that's an interesting perspective coming from an Army officer, is that, I want to see what I can be in the civilian force, if you will.
Yeah.
And do you have any idea what other than being a mother, which is important, being a wife, that's equally important, what do you see yourself doing?
I would like to do a not-for-profit, just having, I do have an Army pension, so I'm very lucky in that I don't have to find a high-powered job if I don't want to, and I don't want to. So I would like to work with something that has to do with conservation, or something that has to do with something with underprivileged children, whether it's child hunger, or or placement, foster care systems, or I'm not exactly sure what I want to do, but I know that I want to do something at more of the local level as well. And so something that's really kind of tied into my community, and I want to be a community member. I want to belong somewhere, and I want when my son grows up, I want him to oh, hey, I know your mom. You know, like I
Right.
want him to have a home that when he goes back, he feels, he just breathes in the air and he's like, this smells like home. So,
Where is that home?
and it's going to be in Keller. It's going to be in Keller,
Really?
Texas for him.
Okay.
Yep. So
Very
we
good.
bought a house. Schools are great.
Yeah.
People are nice. Playgrounds are awesome.
Uh-huh.
You know, a lot of good sporting events. Not a lot of crime. Not a lot of drugs. It looks a-okay to me for this kiddo to have a really nice
Very good.
upbringing.
So we kind of mentioned this earlier. We kind of hit on this earlier. What would you do, or would you serve again? And were you to do that, what would you do differently?
100% every day. I would serve again. So 100% I would serve again. And I don't want to be overly dramatic in that the Army somehow saved my life, because my life was fine. Like I had food. I wasn't in dire straits. I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have done something. I probably would have been dental assistant. Probably. But the Army gave me confidence. The Army gave me just the ability to try and fail, you know, try new things. Gave me a lot of people to meet, a lot of people to absorb information from, a lot of just maybe a little bit of history, and it gave me a value set that was in line with what I wanted, but I didn't know that's what I wanted because I hadn't heard those words in that way before. And so I would 100% choose this path. And I don't know if I was doing anything differently, it wouldn't be on the professional side. My professional life, I really do feel very lucky with all the people I've met, and I've had amazing opportunities. But on the personal side, I would change the time that I invested in people that weren't really worth the time, and the time that I didn't invest in new people because I didn't have the time to do it, or the desire, or the fear of rejection, or whatever it is. So that's what I would change, kind of my personal outlook on things.
What do you feel like your being prior enlisted has contributed to your leadership?
Well, it's a little bit just age, because I came in, I was a little bit older than your average second lieutenant. And with age comes just the natural, you know, a little bit more maturity, which is great. I guess when I came in as an officer, though, I was a little bit on the, maybe I glamorized it of what it was going to be. You know, it was just, the grass was just going to be so green, and it was, you know, my skin would be sparkling and my hair would be like, I don't know what I thought. I really don't know. But I probably romanticized it a little bit too much of what it was going to be. But I think having both experiences, and I think about both experiences, is I feel more pushed as an officer. I feel, and it would have come eventually as a senior NCO. But I made it to E6 on the NCO side, but by and large, you're still quite being told what to do. So whereas an officer, you get general swag idea, and that's it, right? They give you the bucket, they're like, I want it blue. You're like, you want what? And it's up to you to figure it out.
Right.
So I definitely feel more pushed on the officer side to really tap into what is it that I think is the why of it all. How do I decipher it, and what do you do with it?
In your career, I know you've come across some NCOs who've really been kind of your right hand. I think every officer has. And any NCOs that you mentioned someone earlier in your ROTC program, but in your career, any NCOs that were indispensable?
Oh my goodness! So I guess I'm really just kind of on the last 5 years of, you know, kind of my field grade officer years. And I had now Sergeant Major Mike Burek. He was my Master Sergeant E8 at the time when I was at the group. And man, he's a professional. Like, he is just like whip smart, absolutely right hand for just one of those relationships of, hey, this has to get done. And then we both just say, okay. And then there's just this common understanding of this is what the organization needs. And there's nothing that you're talking about. There's no personal problem. There's no, oh, I can't, or why do they want that? There's no fighting the system. It's just like, oh, okay. That's what the organization needs. That's what we're going to do. But also, while we're doing it, let's just fix it for the future, that way we don't come across this problem again. So he's absolutely one of the best. And then I worked with Takesha Evans, Sergeant Major Takesha Evans, when I was in the G1. And I mean, just talk about someone that knows how to speak. Oh my gosh, like I would listen to her talk to other people, and I'm like, wow, like she is just a pro, you know, and I'm there sometimes dropping F-bombs, or I can't find a synonym for what I'm thinking for, and I'm like,
Sometimes there are none.
I'm stuck, and she's just rattling off just beautiful language, like she's reading Shakespeare, you know, like, oh my gosh, I'm in Neanderthal here.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely, I met a ton of really sharp, which goes back to if everyone does their part. Yeah, but I had the luck of having good partnerships. Yeah, absolutely.
What advice do you have for young people entering the military today, and whether it be as enlisted personnel or as officers? What advice do you have for them?
Wish I could just do a brain download.
Yeah. Make it a lot
wish.
easier, wouldn't it?
I kind of feel like I have a wish list for them. And my wish is that they desire to know the why. So we're going to teach you how to do something. You're going to know that this thing, that what is that we do within the profession, right? Why does our military exist? Mm-hmm. We're going to teach you how you're going to do your job. We will teach you to such a point that we give you an MOS, a military occupational specialty. That is going to be your jam. But I would like them to know the why. And when they go around, and I think sometimes people think that, oh, you want me to go out and recruit and find people. And like, I don't want you to do anything, but I do want you to tell your Army story. I want you to go out and tell people what you're getting, because you are getting medical, right? You had a toothache. You went to the doctor. Did you pay for that?
Right.
You didn't, right? Like, you're now already invested. You have a retirement plan just for showing up. We gave you a skill. You have a trade now, you know, you're getting free college. I'm not asking you to do anything, but just tell your Army story. And that's, I think, something that we all have to do, is just tell the story of our lives, which is something that, you know, as a historian, I'm very much into, right?
That's right.
You just tell your story, because again, it's not always about you. And I don't think that we should be so narcissistic in that this is me, it's me day, we're talking about me, but it's about who you might inspire, right? Because not everybody has to be me. And I don't think, you know, Bill Gates or Elon Musk, or I don't need them to put on a uniform.
Right.
I don't. But you just never know who's going to see you one day and say, hey, you know what, I have this new technology. I never thought about it, but maybe the military could use, et cetera, et cetera. But it goes with people telling, you know, sharing their lives and sharing what they do, and knowing why what they do is so important, and instilling that value of why, and that way they feel it, and it's not just something, it's a part of who they are and not just what they're doing.
Do you talk to your cadets about friendships?
Oh my gosh. In one year, not the other.
They're young.
Yeah.
And we were all like that, I guess.
I do.
Yeah,
I instituted peer evals because part of being a good partner is telling people, like, hey, this is what you did right, but this is also what you did wrong, and policing each other up.
Yes.
So I think it's hard when you're in the service, because you're kind of told that you're competing against somebody. And so, okay, that drives you. But, I mean, you have to, I'd rather, there's this hilarious thing I'm going to say. Well, probably going to ask you to cut this out. But but many years ago, literally like 20 years ago, when Paris Hilton was like, when she was like a thing in society, she said, I would rather be a rose in a bed of roses than to be a rose in a bed of thorns. And when I think about that in a military context, is nobody's winning if you're making yourself look good, right? Like, you need to be, so if it works better for you, for your analogy to be that steel sharpens steel, then fine, use that. But the friendships that you make, if you're making each other better, that is the betterment of the Army, right? Like, it can't just be about you and you're the best and you're this. Well, you could die. So then what? What did you do? Who did you train? And who can pick it up and carry it?
So is there anything that you would like to add to this interview that we haven't covered?
I guess I just hope that my love and appreciation, especially now that I've decided to retire,
Yes.
I really want my appreciation for my experiences to come through. And the thing that I will do is, and that I have been doing the last couple of years, is I would encourage everybody to take the time to tell people what they mean to them. And for leaders to know that, like, hey, like, you had this, what you did for me at this time in my life changed me. And then do the same thing with their family and the same thing with their friends. And good, bad, or indifferent, you know, like, this relationship doesn't work for me anymore. Just to kind of just live a little in the, and more in the fearless zone of this is who I am. And in order for me to go to that next spiritual plane of, you know, my development as a person with this soul and this body, is just to make sure they relay. Because I think often in society we go around not knowing, feeling like I had no impact. Right. You know, I went 2 decades of service, and you're kind of like, what was it for? And what in the, you don't know if people never come back and say that was awesome, or not.
Yeah.
Or that thing that you did really sucked. Well, I wish I would know that 20 years ago. I wouldn't have done it again. If I make terrible tacos, don't let me make them for every potluck for the rest of my life.
Right.
So I just
Did that happen? Is that a true story?
that's not a true story. But I will say, what I tell people during my counseling is I take correction as that you care about me enough to make that correction. If you don't make the correction, it means you really don't care about me. And that means you don't care about the core of what we're doing. So I just encourage people to not be so, think that they're so perfect, or that if someone tells them something, that somehow a hit to the ego, because it's not. Communication and telling people is really a form of flattery, and it means that they're investing time and energy and love. You know, pick your word choice, but that's what they're doing when they take the time to tell you something.
Do we not all practice that imposter syndrome a little bit, where we?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all do. That's one of the things I talk about in my class too, is if you think that you're the only one, you are not. You're 100% not. So one of you just take a stab. Just be vulnerable for 5 seconds.
Well, I think that's good advice.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you,
Thank you very
for
much.
your time, and we appreciate you interviewing, and particularly at this time, and with your retirement in view. I think it's very important to have you and have your story in
It is.
perpetuity.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting me look at it that way as well. Thank
Well,
you. I
thank
appreciate it.
you.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. My pleasure.